Rome, the heart of an empire, a city of marble temples, mighty forums, and legendary power. But behind this glory was a city struggling with one of history's first major housing crises. Overcrowding, collapsing buildings, fire outbreaks, rising rent. Life in Rome wasn't easy. Welcome to Rome's urban sprawl, the housing crisis of the ancient city. By the 1st century AD, Rome had grown into a megacity. More than 1 million people lived inside its walls. Senators, soldiers, shopkeepers, slaves, immigrants, and travelers from every corner of the empire. But the city was never designed for such a massive population. People flooded in for work, for trade, for opportunity. But Rome simply didn't have space. Tall apartment blocks called Insulae started rising everywhere. Some were as high as 6 to 8 stories, made of cheap brick and wood. They provided shelter, yes, but they were unstable, dark, and dangerously overcrowded. Rome had become a giant maze of people living on top of each other. Imagine living in a cramped room barely big enough for a bed. No running water, no toilet, and no kitchen. Your only light source, a tiny window if you even had one. This was life for most Romans. The lower floors were safer but expensive. The higher floors were cheap but risky, with weak wooden beams and narrow stairs. Sometimes entire buildings collapsed without warning. One ancient writer described Rome as a city where a man lives with the fear of his own roof falling upon him. And yet, millions called these insulae home. Overcrowding wasn't the only issue. Fire was a constant threat. One spark from a cooking pot could burn down an entire district. Cloud flooding made lower floors unlivable. Money bag rent prices shot up. Recycling garbage piled in the streets. Rat disease spread quickly. Rome was the supercity of its time, but it was bursting at the seams. And then came a leader who decided enough was enough. Narrator. When Augustus became Rome's first emperor, he realized the capital needed order and stability. So he launched a set of reforms that changed city life forever. 1. Strict building regulations. He limited the maximum height of insulae and introduced safety standards. 2. The Vigils, Rome's firefighting force. A full-time team of firefighters and night watchmen. Their job: stop fires before they consumed entire neighborhoods. 3. Citywide district management. Rome was reorganized into 14 districts, each with local overseers tracking housing conditions and safety. 4. More public infrastructure. Aqueducts, sewers, fountains, water access became easier, especially for poorer districts. These changes didn't solve everything, but they prevented disaster on a massive scale. When the city had no more space to grow, Rome expanded outward. Ports like Ostia became new residential hubs. Massive housing complexes were built to support workers, sailors, and traders arriving from across the empire. Better transport routes meant people could live beyond the city and still work inside it, an early example of suburban expansion. A housing crisis is nothing without a food crisis. That's where the annona, Rome's grain distribution system, came in. Every month, huge ships unloaded tons of grain at Ostia. Officials then distributed free or cheap bread to the poor. This kept the population stable and prevented riots. Rome understood, a city cannot survive unless its people can eat. Rome didn't completely solve its housing crisis. No ancient city could, but it pioneered ideas that still shape cities today. Heavy checkmark building regulations, heavy checkmark fire services, heavy checkmark district zoning, heavy checkmark public housing, attempts heavy checkmark urban expansion, heavy checkmark food security systems. In many ways, Rome gave the world its first model of big city management. Behind the empire's greatness was a city fighting to keep its people safe, fed, and sheltered. Rome's housing crisis shows us that even the mightiest civilizations face challenges that feel surprisingly modern. If you enjoyed this dive into ancient history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the world that shaped ours.